So this is my October and November Monochromatic Year book edition, all rolled into one. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you this is a recap of my October and November reading list for the Monochromatic Year book edition. And just a quick reminder, this project was created by KaliFab, who I'll have linked down below, as well as everyone else who has joined in on this project. This project is a makeup panning project, but I had so many panning projects going on that I decided to rejig it a little and do a book panning project. Now, if you're interested in joining in on this project in 2021, it is actually now a part of the Fantastic Ladies. So I will link them also down below in the description box. So if you are interested in jumping on board in 2021, and you're interested in all the details about how this project is structured, they will be all down on the Fantastic Ladies Facebook page. So let's jump straight into what I managed to read in the last 2 months, and it wasn't very much. So first off, in the month of October. In October, I only managed to get through one book, and it was in fact an audiobook which I listened to while I was traveling, and it was the third book in the Fake Boyfriend series. It was called Deke, and it was by Eden Finlay, and I did not think, after reading the first book in the Fake Boyfriend series, which I read earlier this year, I think it was in March maybe, check out that update for more details. I'll have it linked up here, but I didn't think I would end up this deep in the rabbit hole. I read the first book and I didn't love it. It was okay, but it wasn't the best. The second book I got a bit more interested, and this third book I felt drew me in a bit more. I'm actually finding the books are getting better as I go along. In saying that, the library that I have been borrowing these books from, which is an AE library called Libby, they have run out. So the version of the e-library that is attached to my home library, I shall say, have only had the first 3 books in audiobook. Then I thought, well, I'll read them in paperback. Unfortunately, there is no copies, either e or physical, within my library system of the next, I think there's an additional 3 books left in the series. Which means if I would like to continue on with this series, I'll have to purchase it from somewhere, either e or audio e, or just regular hard copy. I am thinking, I have had a look, and they are available via Audible, but they are around $15 per book, and I'm a bit unsure whether they are worth that type of cost for me personally. It's one of those things where I'm happy to read them. They're a bit trashy. I'm happy to read them if I'm not paying for them, but I'm a bit unsure how I sit going forward. Anyway, let me give you a recap of what Deke was about. So you do tend to actually meet the character that will be the main focus of the next book in the book prior. So at the end of book 2, we were introduced to Ollie. Just slightly, we were given information of him, although I would say you don't really need to read each book in concession to be able to read the next one. They are follow-on stories, and they do touch back on previous information, but if you don't have that previous information, I don't think it would massively dampen the story, because in fact you get the information as you go anyway, to a certain extent, obviously. But we, in the second book, we are briefly introduced to Ollie, and we are given a slight detail about Ollie, that the character who gives you about it regarding his sexuality, he's not meant to know. Then we move into book 3, and we start off with Ollie in a bathroom freaking out because he is having dinner with his family. He wants to basically tell them that he's happy because of issues going on. They're aware of his sexuality, but he wants to prove to them that he's happy because he's recently broken up with his longtime boyfriend. And that is where the story starts. It is a chance meeting that ends up being a bit of a whirlwind ride. And I found I actually enjoyed this story more than I did probably originally the first one, especially because it touches on this idea of getting to know someone. They're not just jumping into this idea of being in love, which I did feel kind of happened a bit within the first story. It was kind of all the fanfic tropes shoved into one story, including the almost like love in first few minutes of knowing each other. Where this one, it kind of builds on itself. It starts off, it does go for a bit from a enemies to lovers style, but at the same time it's different. It goes from misunderstanding to lovers, I guess, is the best way to put it. Either way, I definitely enjoyed the book, and I find that I don't want to give away too much of the plot during these videos. So sometimes I feel like the information I've given is a bit lackluster, and it doesn't really introduce people to the story as it really is. But I don't want to just read out the blurb, and at the same time, I don't want to give away massive spoilers, though at times I do think I probably give away a little more than I should. But if you're interested in going into another fake boyfriend's story, I would definitely recommend giving this one a go. And I'm kind of interested in reading some of Eden Finlay's other stories. I have seen that she has a couple others that are available to me within different series she has written from my library, so I might actually give a few of her other works a try in the next year or so. So that was the book I read for October. At this current point, I can't remember what the colour was for October, but I'll put it down just here somewhere because I actually can't remember. Anyway, let's move on to November, and the November colour was peach or tan, and I managed to get through 2 books within that, one of them being an audiobook and one of them being a physical book. I'll start with the audiobook, and that was Dark Fates by G.K. DeRosa. And I would say that this is a teen or a young adult fiction. The story is a bit of a apocalyptic world story. You've got 2 fractions of humanity, I guess. You have the vampires and you have the humans. They are called slightly different things, but you have the humans and the vampires who live on 2 separate areas, and they do not cross, and they have not crossed within 100 years because of a prophecy that says that the love between a vampire and a human will set about the destruction of the world. We start the story following a character who is breaking into a high security area. It turns out to steal a plane, and it also turns out that the character that in the first few pages is not given either a name or a gender turns out to be a young female human named Solaris. So Solaris steals this plane, which she then proceeds to crash. Spoiler, and is unfortunately, I guess, discovered by a young prince vampire named Cage. They are not meant to cross in any way, shape or form, and actually by doing so, both are betraying their own kind. All Solaris wants to do is go home, and all Cage wants to do is discover what is within the marked boxes within the plane and what they mean for his kind, as the boxes are marked with the coat of arms for his royal family. And that is a majority of the story. It's one of these things where not a lot happens for a long period of time. I guess it is because the characters do develop a affinity for each other. They develop care, and I would almost say a form of love for each other. And I guess that can't happen within 5 minutes or, 100 pages. So it is quite a spread out story. You start off with a high impact event, and then you kind of drift in this area of they're together, but they can't go anywhere because she's got a broken leg, and they're trying to heal, and he saved her life with his blood, but now they've got this connection. And it's him dealing a lot with his own personal issues, and this idea of being the perfect prince compared to his twin brother, but being the perfect prince, always obedient, always doing the right thing, to essentially being a traitor and knowing where his loyalties lie and questioning himself and his own loyalties. So we follow that story, and then we go and discover what's in the boxes, and then we do our best to get Solaris home before the story ends. So this is the first book in a series called the Vampire Prophecy series, and it is essentially a bit of a setup to build this relationship between these two characters. And I found bits of it were interesting. So they were walking through the Badlands, I guess. I've forgotten what they're called, but I'm calling them the Badlands, which is essentially old ruins of buildings that separate, of a whole city, that separate the human side and the vampire side. And nobody is within these areas, supposedly. Nobody lives in these areas, and you can't stay in there for long periods of time. It is a rather dangerous area to be in. So in saying that, the characters do have to travel through those areas to get Solaris back home, and it is interesting because they touch on this idea that there could possibly be others or things or creatures we do not really know, but there is something in the Badlands. But we have not been introduced to them as of yet. In fact, we've mainly only been introduced to Cage and his family, his setup. We do have a slight indication of what Solaris and her life is like, but majority we have dealt with so far is Cage and his life. So I am in a bit of a two ways. I'm interested I would like to know what is living in the Badlands. I want to know what happens next, especially because the story ends in a rather cliffhanger sort of way. I would like to know what happens next, and I want to know how the prophecy will be fulfilled, because the prophecy states something along the lines of a love between a vampire and a human will cause the destruction of both kind, or something like that. So I'd be interested to see how this prophecy will be fulfilled. Will it be one of those situations where the prophecy is the words mean different than what people interpret them to? You know, when you read something that says the destruction of the world, but really it means the world as it is, and it's going to be a better one afterwards? Or is it a situation where really these two are now in a situation where they are literally going to destroy everything? Or is there something else in line with that? And also, I do wonder if such a prophecy, because vampires and humans used to live together in harmony, and I'm assuming that there was things like love between the two, but when the prophecy was brought out, announced, they cut those ties. So in that case, I wonder if this is almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, in the fact that none of this would have happened if the initial split hadn't occurred. That is just a thought and where my brain goes while I'm reading this book. But I did enjoy it to a certain level. I found it rather cumbersome at times, and I do think that if I wasn't listening to it via an audiobook and I was reading it, I would have enjoyed it a lot less. But I'm in a bit of a pickle because I am considering reading the next one. But we'll see how that goes, because I didn't love it enough to rush out and get the next one. And in fact, when I first finished it, I thought I don't want to read the next one. But thinking about these ideas and these subjects or these plots that were just slightly touched upon in this book, I am interested to see what happens next. So I may in fact read the next one. So stay tuned to future videos regarding my reading to see what happens. And last but not least, well, maybe I should say last and least, is the only physical book I read within November. And that was Bared to You by Sylvia Day. This is the first book in the Crossfire novel series. And it says somewhere, where is it? This is by Dear Author. It is a recommendation, and it says, if I were to recommend any book today to readers who enjoyed 50 Shades of Grey, this would be the first one I would offer, Scorching Love Scenes. I also found on the internet before I started reading this book, it said that this was better written than 50 Shades of Grey. Now, I was saying that I have seen the movies for 50 Shades of Grey, but I have not read the books. I started to read the books, but I could not get through the first chapter. I did not really like the main characters. So I got this book thinking, okay, so it is going to be a little bit of erotic literature, and it's going to touch on some themes similar to 50 Shades. I did not enjoy this book. I think that there is a time and a place for such books, and I think that at times erotic literature is a good read. I don't mind it. But this book specifically, I found some of the wording and some of the actions to be terrible. Terrible is probably the best way to describe it. It was ridiculous. There were certain scenes between the characters that I just could not handle. And I did not like the main character either. You got the impression, you found out very quickly that she had been through some very rough times in her life. And you also find out that Gideon, who is Gideon Cross, the main male protagonist, I guess, you find out that he has the same, but where Eva bears her soul, Gideon does not. Let me just say right now, before I go any further into this book, that this is the type of book that some people will like, some people will not. Some people are interested in these types of themes and stories, and some are not. So I'm going to put in a trigger warning here before I go any further, and say that if you do not like, if you are triggered by anything that discusses sexual assault, etc., etc., please do not read this book, and please stop this video now. But I'm just going to briefly touch on a few things that did occur within this story. So we learn very quickly that Eva, in her past, has had a rather terrible sexual experiences. In fact, I would say that she dealt with some molestation things that occur between her and her stepbrother. You learn that quite quickly, and she does bare her soul to Gideon in regards to that story. Then you move into Gideon's story, and you are very made aware quite quickly that something similar has happened to him in his past. But you do not know by who, and you are left at the end of the story still not knowing by who. And on top of that, he has got some, both have issues that are caused by this, and Eva has been seeing a therapist. Gideon has not, though Eva does talk him into starting to see a therapist, which is a good thing, especially after an incident occurs between Gideon and Eva, where in his sleep Gideon attempts to rape Eva. That would put a dampener on most relationships, I would think, but it does not. They want to try to work through it, which For that I give them kudos. However, their relationship is very sexualized. It is all about lust, and they're at this point by the end of this book that Gideon essentially wants Eva to move in with him. They've on this whirlwind relationship, and it turns out they've only been together for approximately 2 to 3 weeks. So that for me I found a bit hard to swallow. On top of that, I found that Eva, who comes across at the start of the book as quite a strong-willed character with obviously some issues, she bends to Gideon in ways that I didn't expect her to. And I also find that Gideon is a bit too much for me. I guess he is a little bit of a Christian Grey style character, but it was too much for me. And this book itself doesn't bring in the whole BDSM storyline like bam, here it is, where I felt it did a bit of that in 50 Shades. Please take that I've only watched the movies. This kind of strings it along. They have they have a lot of sexual encounters, and then at the end of the book, Gideon basically presses this idea and says, hey, this is what I think is going on here and I think you're into. Eva does not react well. She then has a best friend. His name is Carrie. He has been through a bit of a rough life as well, and I love him. I would like to know more about his character. He is on a bad track, so if I do read the second book in this series, it will be because I'm interested in Carrie. I did go and read the Goodreads reviews for the second book, and the questions I have from this book supposedly are not answered in the second book, so that is a bit of a turn off for me, but we will see whether I do venture into it. Also, I will say that I found some of the sex scenes to be rather ridiculous. I would definitely recommend, if you are interested in this, going and having a look at Goodreads and some of their reviews, because some of the lines in this book, which I do not feel comfortable saying and putting on YouTube, are hilarious, ridiculous, and not sexy in my opinion. In saying that, I do think that those who enjoyed 50 Shades of Grey would possibly enjoyed this book as well. I guess for me, I went into the book being told that this was a better version of 50 Shades, a more realistic version in that, and that's kind of what I thought I would step into. However, it is not. The only thing I will definitely give this book kudos for is, yes, Gideon Cross is rich. He runs a big company. He very similar to Christian Grey. He runs Crossfire companies. That's why it's Crossfire novel. And he is very, very rich. However, unlike Anna, Eva is actually rich as well. Her family, she comes from money. So there is not the power play might come about within their sexual relationship or their personal relationship, but it has not come about within the monetary version. So that has been a little bit of a relief to read. So that is all I really want to say about this book. It's a bit hard to go too far into this, especially because I know that these types of books are for people who enjoy these types of books. They can be quite polarizing. People will either really enjoy them, or they will quite not enjoy them and be rather against them. So I don't want to go too much into it, because I do want to keep these videos rather to a level where people feel comfortable watching them, no matter what they do or don't read. But that's kind of this book. It is a bit of a hard read. Bits of it seem ridiculous. Bits of it are quite triggering, I guess, and quite dark. And I would say that a lot of the stuff probably isn't handled as well as it should be. But I guess at the same time, maybe that's life and people tend to handle things not always the best way that they should. So those are the 3 books I've managed to read in the last 2 months. Luckily for me, December, which colour is white, I have finished uni for the year. So I am hoping, fingers crossed, that that will mean I will have more time to read in the next month. Before the new year, I will actually do my finale for this series with my December recap, and there I will discuss my reading plans for 2021. So stay tuned for that. So with that all said and done, I'm Verity. That was the October and November recap for the Monochromatic Year book edition. And now to the outro.